We're happy to have Deanna Minich as our speaker tonight. She's a PhD and a nutrition scientist, educator, and functional medicine expert who bridges modern science with ancient healing systems to illuminate a more integrative model of health. With over 25 years of experience, she's known for her work in phytochemistry, women's health, and the rainbow diet, translating concepts like chakras, color, and light into measurable physiological processes. As Chief Science Officer at Symphony Natural Health, she brings a unique, evidence informed approach to aligning nutrition, lifestyle, and consciousness for a full spectrum well-being. So we're very happy to have her tonight. And we are the Institute of Noetic Sciences Vancouver Community Group, and we're interested in having topics on education, consciousness, and human potential. So Deanna, take it away. We're very happy to have you.
Well, it's a delight and an honor to be here with all of you on a Saturday evening in April. And I'm excited about this. Dottie had mentioned that she first wanted me to say a little bit about myself, how I got to this work. So I'll give you not the professional bio, but more the personal story just quickly before we dive in, because I have slides. I'm very much into visuals and art and color, as you might imagine. So I'm going to pull up slides right after I quickly tell you about my personal story. How did I get to this information? I grew up in the 1970s, so I'm 55 years old. I grew up in the Midwest in Chicago. And when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my mother was pregnant with my younger brother. And at that time, she went through this revelation as it related to food and faith. So I grew up Catholic, and I would say that things amped up and ramped up when she was pregnant this time around. And so that was a little bit different for me because I was used to eating certain foods and, just going to Catholic school, but there was nothing really like earth-shattering there. But things started to change. She started to watch what she was making for the family. We couldn't eat certain foods anymore. She was much more involved with the church. So there was this connection between food and faith. Well, I was not very receptive to that because I was a preteen who just wanted to be like all the other kids. So I would sneak sugar and chocolate and Oreo cookies and use all of my allowance money in order to just buy candy. And so I developed an eating disorder at a younger age. So as a teenager, more or less. And as a result, I think of that and kind of bad eating and sneaking a lot of these foods, I started to develop some of my own health issues. So I had, it was in my family line, it was in my father's line, but I had endometriosis, which is a inflammatory condition of the uterus. And I also had a lot of gut issues, skin issues. So I wanted to study science to try to figure myself out. I went to college, was a biology major. I was also pre-med. And then I also studied literature and philosophy. I took my first yoga class when I was 19. I think I was always really in search of the truth because I was trying to figure things out. And I had very strict upbringing. My father was a Chicago police officer. So, here we have religion and rules and discipline. And, I was always a really good student because, I had to be, there were expectations in our home. So anyway, when I got to college, I felt free. It was like, okay, I'm going to go and study whatever I want. And so I studied science. I was attracted to other systems of thought. So I never thought I would go on to actually study nutrition. I thought I'm going to be a medical doctor. I was always very drawn to, again, the human body. But there was something in me that changed during college. And I decided, you know what, that yoga class really woke me up in a different way. And I decided, I actually think I'm going to go study nutrition because I think I'd rather know what you can do before you get a disease, all the many changes and choices that you can make, at least within nutrition and lifestyle. So I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I studied there for 3 years. I continue to deepen my interest in spiritual topics because I think that as a scientist, you're always searching. So I started to get into more metaphysical aspects. I then went on for my PhD in medical science. I started studying fatty acids. And one thing that happened for me in the last year that I was finishing my doctorate, and that was because I had so much stress, my symptoms started to get worse. And I kind of had this moment where it was one weekend, and I went to the art store and I just bought a bunch of paints. I bought this big roll of paper and I bought these paints, and I just started to paint bright colors on this long stretch of paper. And I put it up in my apartment, and I would stare at this. It was almost like a piece of myself. And so I noticed that every time I got stressed, I had to get it out in some kind of color. And I started to see people as colors. I would see, certain people like, oh, they're blue to me. Like I would see certain people in, I don't know if I would call it an aura, but I would just kind of get a sense of who they were from a color aspect. And so color kind of became my tool of helping me with stress, also helping me to make sense in the world. And as I continued on and got older into my 30s, my soon to be husband, he started to notice that my paintings had a certain configuration. There were a lot of spirals, they were pink, orange, and gold. And basically, he said one night, he said, Deanna, I think you're painting your ovaries and your uterus and you're putting it all over the house. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that I was painting parts of my inner self that couldn't really be expressed verbally, right? And so, thankfully for him and for me, we kind of work this out. So, I started to use art more intentionally and color and basically resolve my endometriosis, got my gut on track, all of those things. Of course, I was doing all of the functional medicine things like the nutrition and all kinds of modalities, acupuncture, you name it, I was doing it. But I do think that creativity unlocked what needed to be unlocked for me. So, what I'm going to share with you tonight in this presentation is a system that I've put together with my own personal experience, but then also Jeanette, you were mentioning Carolyn Mace and some of the other people who, during these years of my life, I started to not just read scientific books, but I was reading Carolyn Mace, Anatomy of the Spirit. I was reading Candace Pert's books, Molecules of Emotion. I was reading Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief. And I was thinking, they're onto something, but the science that I was studying wasn't really looking at those things. So I started to kind of take different pieces for what made sense to me using color as the operating system. So yes, I use the chakra system, but then I'm also, you'll see it's not completely in alignment. And in fact, some people have criticized me because I'm not 100% adherent to the chakra system. I think I'm more or less there, but I'm again doing it based on personal experience and also in working with clients over the years. So what I'd like for us to do, I'm going to bring up the presentation. And by the way, I've written books on this and I have a certification program. I've done all of those things. But, basically for me at this point in my life, it's really about helping people to come into their most realized potential through not just science, but also art, creativity, spirituality. I have my own podcast called Science and Spirituality Talks because I feel that with science, it's just one part of the equation. There are multiple parts of the equation. And when you are seeking truth, you're going to find other things, right? And science is of the head. And to me, the chakra system is a great operating system to hold both science, art, creativity, and the energetics. What Milt was saying about, in energy, we hold the possibility. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to tour you through the rainbow. I'm going to ask you about colors that you like, and I want you to kind of reflect for yourself as we go through the colors if you have a strong feeling about certain ones of them versus others. You know, one of the first things I usually do when I'm lecturing or doing a workshop on this material is I'll ask people, what color are you really drawn to right now? And what color kind of repulses you, or you really don't like that color, or you would never wear that color. So maybe we just take a second, if you have the ability to write it in the chat, maybe just write down before we start to go through the colors, what color you're most drawn to right now. Like if you had to be in a room with all the walls painted that color, what would that color be? And be as specific as you can. And maybe it's a couple of colors that you're really drawn to. So just take a second if you can, and I'll look at the chat and just kind of feel out what you're drawn to. And if you're drawn to green, like Jeanette, is it a sage green? Is it a lime green? Is it a forest green, an emerald green? I think that's kind of fun too, just to kind of see, because within each color, you have this spectrum, right? It's like there are layers of color here. So Jeanette, you're wearing aquamarine. You're vibing to more green. Victoria says light, bright yellow. Great. There's actually research on yellow. Yellow is actually one of the most popular colors, which is really surprising. But maybe not, because many people like the bright light of the sun. Sharon is saying wall would be soft, warm, neutral, white, and teal is the favorite color. Okay. Wow, that's great. Very specific. And Jeanette clarified by saying sage green. Paul, you're saying the early morning glow. Ooh, that's nice. So Paul, would that be more like a soft orange, pinkish, reddish, or just kind of like a brighter hue? And Catherine says, I'd love vivid colors, tangerines, red shades. Okay, warming colors. So sometimes, with colors, I kind of put them in two camps in a very simplistic way. The warming colors, the lower chakras, then the cooling colors, the upper chakras. And so we're going to go through each of them. So Sharon loves beach colors. Okay, great. Super. Sometimes I think that color can be a great diagnostic tool for energy, vibration, frequency, just kind of like where we are feeling in ourselves in the moment. And some of us, I think, have a constitutional color where since we were little, we always liked a certain color. And then for others of us, that color can kind of change. So Dottie is saying tonight, maybe cool colors like purple. Jeanette, my eyes are most comfortable with aqua. Okay, great. All right, so let's move through. We're going to go through each of the colors, and I'm going to tell you how I see their significance and some of the things that you can do about it. I know I mentioned this word chakra. This is a Sanskrit word, and it refers to the wheels, spinning wheels of light, or where there's a lot of activity. And if you look at some of the ancient Indian spiritual philosophical texts, what you see is that many of these places of activity are in the body through the middle portion of the body. And we would say that in medicine, this aligns to the endocrine system. So the red, you could say maybe adrenals, orange, we're right there in the lower abdomen, the ovaries for women, the yellow right there in the digestive tract, solar plexus, the green in the heart, aquamarine in the throat. Then you have the third eye or the pituitary gland. You have that kind of midnight blue color. And then the white would be the pineal gland. So I see the chakra system in more medical eyes of, oh, I see what the ancient rishis were onto. They were onto this circuitry within us. So the way that I use it within what I call food and spirit is to use it as a framework. Yes, I do think that these are energy centers. I also look at them as more, I would say, actual anatomical places where there is symbolism attached. And again, that's where I kind of have my own interpretation of that symbolism. So I already mentioned Dr. Candace Pert. Dr. Carolyn Mace, this whole field of what is called psychoneuroendocrinology. Sometimes we call that psychoneuroendocrine immunology, PNEI. I know that this group knows about that. So we are learning more and more about how the body and what we see is just one layer. We already think of physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, but there is more and more science to suggest that we have subtle energy fields that may be affected. So we're starting to see some of that work come out in quantum biology. So quantum physics meeting biology and using the premise of looking at the body in terms of fields, whether light fields, electromagnetic fields. I think that this is really interesting, and a lot of new technologies are coming out around light, sound, and also looking at from a health from a health perspective, how much things like electricity or Wi-Fi, a lot of fields can impact our own fields. So I think that we're learning more about kind of the non-physical aspects of who we are. So I really like this idea, and this comes from Carolyn Mace and others, where your psychology becomes your biology, and and vice versa. Your psychology becomes your biology becomes your psychology. There's really no separation between the two. So when we talk about the gut, to me, this is a transformative center. It is digesting food, but it's also digesting thought. And so we think about mindful eating, right? Not getting eating kind of mixed up with lots of overthinking and rumination, right? So that we can bring those streams of awareness together. So the way that I talk about these, I actually don't call them chakras because I want the concept to be very available, accessible to many people in common language. And being that I grew up Catholic and still very connected to many people within Christianity, I wanted something that would be agnostic in terms of language. So what I did was I took the chakra system and then brought them into symbolic language and used words like root, flow, fire, love, truth, insight, and rhythm. And so I call these the seven systems of health. And in fact, I have kind of this is what I use as part of the training in which I'm teaching practitioners and even using this with clients, where I have each of the systems off to the far left. So each of the colors with the shape, with the word, the respective anatomy, what the physiology is about, what are the core symbolic and psychological issues, and then here's the piece that I feel like I have gone further with, which is looking at how can foods energetically support those systems. And it's not just foods. I also wrote a book on supplements. If you take omega-3 fatty acids, how are you changing the flow within you? If you are having a fiber supplement, is that supportive of the fire and also maybe the root? So I have created manuals of helping people to understand how to look at the balance of each of these. And I even have a questionnaire on my website where you can go, and maybe after this, you're kind of curious to figure out, am I balanced in my truth? Am I balanced in my insight? Or am I overactive? Am I underactive? And then based on that, to figure out how you would balance it with foods and lifestyle. So this is really the core. Everything that you're seeing here on this one slide is pretty much what I'm going to unpack for you as we go through. So I would encourage you to ask me questions as we go too, just in case I'm going too quickly or, some of this isn't making sense and if there's a different way I can say it. Here's another diagram. This was in my I've been doing this since 2008. So, different graphics, and I'm very visually inclined. So I'm always trying to think of like, how do I teach this in ways that people just understand intuitively? So this is one of the graphics of looking at, again, these energy centers within us. What are the respective foods? And then on the right here, what are some of the practices sometimes around those foods to start to do to bring that system in balance? And you're going to see as we go through each of the colors, I want you to do a self-assessment on them in terms of just what we hear about food, too much sugar, or we're not eating enough protein, or we might have the wrong kind of fats in the diet, right? We're going to talk about some of the kind of the societal aspects of food. So let me just see, I have a couple of things in the chat. Paula is saying, what about the skeletal bony system and connective tissue? That would be the root, and we're going to get into the root right now. All right, so let's focus on this color red. What's interesting is that, I've had people ask me, what if they don't see certain colors in a certain way? I feel like, at least what we know from people who are even born blind, color can be felt in certain ways depending on the person. So everybody has their own experience of color because we all have different eyes. We all have different rods and cones, which enable us to see color. So the way that you see this red slide may not be how everybody else sees it. And that's okay. But again, remember that within each color, we have a darker hue moving into a brighter, lighter color. So let's start with red. And I don't know if, did anybody say that they liked red specifically, or any feelings about red? Maybe you want to put it in the chat. Catherine said vivid colors, so maybe this qualifies. What's interesting in my experience of doing workshops and teaching with colors is some people really love red. Like they're very drawn to red. And then other people are very polarized to red. They feel like it's too much, it's too strong. And of course, that might depend on the shade of the red. Dottie likes red. Okay. So it's kind of interesting because I'm going to bring together again the scientific studies, and I'm also going to talk about more of the symbolic spiritual meanings. But when we think of red, red in the science can denote reactivity, inflammation, and even anger. It's a quick reactive response. It can also signify passion. You think about Valentine's Day, red hearts, and, it conveys some kind of emotion, a very strong emotion. So this kind of face here, you think about even in our environment and how things are color coded. And it's really interesting because I've traveled throughout the world and you see different colors for different signs. But I would say pretty much universally, a stop sign is red in most countries. Red is going to evoke a reaction. You're going to stop when you see the sign. If you see a red ambulance or red siren, red fire hydrant, you're going to pay attention to those things. So red is about paying attention and creating some kind of a response. Now, I'm going to take us into the body and how that translates, but first, just to understand the psychology of red. Many times red can mean dangerous, poisonous, don't go there, off limits, right? So I'm showing here a poisonous mushroom. So it does catch our eye in nature because it's like, wow, all this green, and then I see this red. But then also think of maybe picking berries on a bush and how, from a survival aspect, berries at certain times of the year would catch our eye that would confer survival, because we would get certain nutrients. But maybe in some cases, not having certain foods would also be important to acknowledge. I also think of blood. In fact, I just posted in my Facebook group today, I was reading an article about blood being used as a way to modulate aging and looking at blood as some part of the body in order to look at metabolites. The science is becoming much more sophisticated about blood. For example, there are technologies in different medical practices around filtering blood, removing toxins. And actually, that's quite old. We even think of applying leeches back in medieval times to remove, the humors or the what would be seen as negative from the body. So, blood, what does blood connect to? If we think of our ancestry, our heritage, our ethnicity, our genes. So, when we think of red and the root system of health, this is everything constitutional. This is what you were given at birth, and it's about how we survive in the everyday world in a physical way. When it comes to food, the focus is if we think of red foods that tend to be more rich in things like insoluble fibers and also certain, I would say, antioxidants or plant compounds that help us to fight things like inflammation. So, I just actually, funnily enough, I just posted on beets today. Beets have a very interesting class of compounds that you don't find widely in other foods, just maybe three or four other foods. But basically, there is this compound class called betalains. And betalains are what give the beets kind of that reddish color. And what we know about those betalains and some other phytochemicals is that when we eat beets, it helps the blood vessels to open wider. That's through something called nitric oxide. And so even the beet greens, actually, it's not limited to red foods, but the red and the connection to better blood flow, better circulation, and just better grounding. Sometimes when I talk with people about food, it's not just what we eat, but it's how we eat. And for some people, like if we eat too much, we can kind of like, I would say, feel very grounded and very stuck, almost immobile. We want to almost sleep, right? But really, the sweet spot with food is just to get enough energy so that we don't feel kind of soggy and sleepy. So, this first system, I refer to as the root. It is the system in the body and through our environment that gives us a sense of safety, survival, and stability. And if we think about it in terms of a response in the body, it would encompass the inflammatory and the immune response together. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. It's kind of interesting because so many different diseases have been recognized as having an inflammatory component to it. So many people think about following an anti-inflammatory diet with a lot of these colorful foods in order to bring down and cool the body off from a lot of this inflammation. And what is inflammation? Typically, it's defined medically as redness, pain, heat, and swelling, all kind of like red, right? If you've got red in the body somewhere, whether you had an injury to your leg, you've got a cut, maybe you're bleeding, right? All of it is red, it's inflammatory. So there is a threat to the stability of the body. I also think about it from the aspect of stress. So this is kind of a more involved diagram, but basically connecting to the brain perceives some kind of threat. And then the adrenal glands are part of that endocrine system that are then producing things like, I would say, whether it's adrenaline or it can also produce long-term things like glucocorticoids, so things like cortisol. And ultimately, this can change our immune activity. Now, if we continue to have that stress response, that kind of puts us in the seat of trauma where we don't feel safe, where now the neurons, you could see up here, they start to get this excitability. So now the moment that the threat comes in again, there is this alarm, right? So, how do we calm down the stress response? This is really the focus of, I would say, the root chakra It's almost like, how do we create stability? And in fact, whenever I have people do the questionnaire, this is this system and another system are like the number one issues that people have because stress is so out of control. And so there isn't this sense of being grounded, present, aware. And there is even a paper in a journal called Scientific Reports, which talks about how people who have inflammation tend to be more reactive and they can't like, have patience with certain things, right? So it becomes very challenging if you are inflamed in body to have presence in mind. That's why many times we want to just focus on, let's just deal with inflammation, whether it's acute inflammation or even the chronic inflammation that can happen because maybe you have a tooth infection that you don't take care of, or maybe you have something with your sinuses where over time you have allergies and there's constant inflammation, right? This just kind of wears at the body. So I'll stop after the root system to answer questions. I just have a few more slides on the root. So I also, when I'm teaching this and through the questionnaire, people can figure out, okay, I think that the root system is an issue for me, but in which direction? Is it too much, where I've got too much immune activity? I've got too much inflammation. I may be very vigilant, hyper vigilant. I have high trauma. I have anxiety. It makes me feel ungrounded. I'm not making good decisions. I'm reactive. Or maybe it's underactive, where now we have low immunity. Maybe we get sick all the time, right? Because keep in mind that this root chakra system, it's not just, it's about how we connect to the outside world physically. And if there's an immune threat or the immune system is not able to deal with what the environment is presenting, now we have this constant, I would say, wear and tear on the body. We start to use up our nutrients, right? We start to feel like low energy. So usually when I think about foods, here's where the nutrition part comes in. The first thing that I think about is when I think of the stress response or when I think of like the lack of stability, I think of let's bring in protein. Many people aren't getting enough protein. We hear a lot about that. Sometimes sometimes people are getting too much protein, like they're too fixated on protein. But I would say for the most part, people are especially if they're eating less as they get older, they really need to stack the deck on those meals with more protein and make sure that those meals are nutrient dense. So protein helps to stabilize blood sugar, and also fat does a bit as well. But protein, as long as we're not having those spikes of blood sugar, now we're going to feel more stable. And we'll get into that in the fire system, but also bringing in immune enhancing foods, even supplements that will give us things like minerals. Keep in mind, this is very high level. There's a lot more here that I go into, but basically when we're talking about the root, we're talking about protein. We're talking about insoluble fiber like you would have with the beets. We're talking about anything that supports the immune system, and also red colored plant foods like the beets, cherries, watermelon, cranberries. I mean, anything that is a red colored plant food would carry a lot of the different plant compounds that have been referred to as polyphenols. Also, I've had some students work with me and we've just looked at certain things. And interestingly, tomatoes are, pretty high in vitamin C. Vitamin C helps the adrenals. Vitamin C helps the stress response. It helps to nourish the immune system. And then finally, just lifestyle. So how do we support our root system? How do we get back to feeling safe, having a strong community, aiming to be present and centered, being in nature? When we get into the green, I'll get into nature a little bit more, but I think all of you may have heard about grounding, right? Just this is where, wearing shoes, I mean, just even thinking of the obvious, like making sure like, you've got your feet well taken care of. You've got proper shoes, that if you can be barefoot for a little bit in nature where it's safe to do so, really connecting into the lower part of the body to feel connected to the earth element. So I'm going to stop there and just see if anybody has any questions before we move into the flow, the orange. So the root system is a big one for many people. So Jeanette was saying that red that I was showing hurts my eyes. It was kind of bright, I know. Um, and Sharon says if I wear red, it has to be a blue red, not an orange red. That's interesting. And I would say, like, you can also temper your psychology based on what you wear. Again, there are so many facets to this. I'm mostly just giving you a very high level, especially as it relates to food. But when I have put people on this food program where we do 3 colors of every part of the rainbow, they wear those colors, they see how they feel in those colors. And so if you feel like you need, Catherine is saying here, red is passion, vibrancy, and aliveness. If you feel like red gives you those things and you need a little bit more aliveness, then I would say wear some red. Eat red foods, wear the color red, surround yourself in red. Use it as a psychological aspect of healing as much as a physical one. So Paula's saying osteoarthritis, yes. So if we've gone too far over, too much red, any kind of itis, if you see any word with the itis, that denotes already we have a condition that is bringing in inflammation. So the bones, anything that gives the body structure, whether it's the skin, or it's high protein, whether it's the nails, anything that you can see on the outside, this reflects your root system. So again, there's so many features and facets to go with here. One thing I'm going to call out, because I see this a lot with people, is minerals. So Paula, when you're asking about osteoarthritis, I'm thinking about bones. Bones, and especially as I think it was Sharon that was talking about, having a personal trainer, really getting invested in physical strength. And because this confers a lot of benefit for the body, when you feel strong, there's a psychological aspect to that as well. Then you feel more safe. You feel like you could do more things. You could feel like you're going to function better. So there are many different aspects to really being centered in the body and feeling embodied and strong in that. So any questions about anything that I've talked about or anything that you're thinking about? You can verbalize them or chat them in. Daddy.
Is that chart that you had, is that in your book?
It is in the book. It's in the whole detox book. It's not in the Rainbow Diet. It's in another book with the whole food plan. That book is called Whole Detox. Even though it says detox, it's actually what I'm explaining to you tonight. So in the book, you get a smaller one, kind of like this. But yes, it's the whole chart. And actually, you can just go, you don't have to get the book. You can just go to the website and download the PDF.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
you can take the quiz and then you can just download the PDF of the Food and Spirit 7 systems.
Great.
Norma, did you have a question?
Ah, yeah. Oh, this is too interesting to have a question yet. I want to know more. I really do. So,
Okay. Okay. All right. I just wanted to give everybody a pause here. Anybody feel like the root system is the one that might be a little bit problematic? I mean, osteoarthritis would fall into the root system for sure. All right. If not, we will move on to orange. Oh, by the way, I just have some science here. I kept this very, again, basic, but I have a lot of the scientific papers and all of that about the aspect of, community, grounding, earthing. Jeanette, you have a question.
It isn't actually a question. It's something that happened last week concerning grounding. And I had to put my kitty to sleep on Wednesday, and I came home, was awake. I thought I'd get a wonderful sleep. Awakened at 4:30 with a abscessing tooth,
Mm,
and got a hold of the periodontist the next morning early. But what happened is I had an appointment with my osteopathic physician, who is just half-hour appointments at a time. And he worked on my upper back and up to the uh, base of my skull.
mm.
That's about all he did. But when I went home, he opened up a dam. And when I went home, uh, I, I mean, I was sobbing. I was sobbing before I went home, but I continued. I just sat down on a stool when I went in the house and just continued sobbing for over an hour. And then I finally got up and got something to eat and continued. But anyway, what happened after all of that is that suddenly I realized that I I was grounded for once. I mean, I hadn't realized how ungrounded I had been. I'd been hospicing my kitty for several weeks and months actually. She became very high maintenance, and I was not. My I was not grounded, and all of a sudden, I walked outside, and my feet were comfortable. They weren't. They didn't feel I was walking on rocks, even though I wasn't. My back was at that particular time not hurting. And I have my lumbar area is really unstable, and I have a real problem with that. But anyway, all of these things, all of a sudden, it came to me. I feel grounded,
Wow.
and it was just I took a whole load off after I left the osteopathic office.
That's beautiful. I love how you
Yeah.
connected so many dots there, right? In terms
Hmm.
of, allowing yourself to feel the emotion, and also, having some kind of body work to kind of like bring you
Hmm.
in. And I feel like that's so important. Sometimes we need something somatic, not
Yes.
something verbal, but we need like actual touch and we need manipulation to bring us back into our body. So I feel like that is so important, just the basics of feeling grounded and present,
Hmm.
especially with stress response or allowing for that flow of emotion. When you have both of those things, when you're present and then you allow your emotions to flow, then it's just like a much like more balanced combination. So thank you for sharing. That's yeah, as we go through each of these, I think what you're going to find too is like how you could see these dots connecting in your life with your own personal circumstances and like things that you might be connecting to. And then even from here on out, as things happen where you feel like, oh, I feel so ungrounded today. Oh, Deanna mentioned maybe I should eat protein. Maybe I need to eat something. Sometimes people feel ungrounded because they're just forgetting to eat. Like their blood sugar is, when you have escalating blood sugar and it's all over the place, people feel very ungrounded. Sometimes you get headaches, dizzy, right? So sometimes it's just very basic physical maintenance of the body and what we require. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, let's move to orange. Anybody like orange?
Mhm.
It's interesting because orange was a color that I did not like. I did not like orange. I did not like pink. I would never wear these colors. When we look in chakra lexicon and the chakra system, we would see that orange is the color of flow, whereas the root system, the root chakra, is about structure and strength. And, we're talking right angles and squares and lines. Now we are talking about curves and spirals and spins and unpredictability and kind of some chaos. Right? This is the seat of creativity. And where are we in the body? We're in the low belly, where we have the colon. The colon oversees resorption of water. So the root system is about earth and groundedness, steadiness, safety, home, space. This is about water. So some of you were talking about how you like the beach colors, right? Like If you're a water sign, the water element, and this is where things start to flow. It's also the seat of beauty, aesthetics, and joy and pleasure. And, just like this flower, just like being open and expanding into like, I don't know if you like these. I love these colors now. I didn't like these colors years ago, but now I look at them like, wow, I love this. Um, so when we talk about foods, the obvious, we're going to be talking about things that make us flow. What makes us flow? Water, the obvious, right? We are mostly water with a little bit of structure, right? But as we get older, we start to lose that balance. We actually become less water, and our thirst mechanisms aren't kicking in as well. So that's why we always have to remember to keep water in close proximity to wherever we are. Never drinking from plastic if you can avoid that, right? We know about the science of plastic. We want glass. I put in my water minerals. In fact, before I jumped on this call with all of you, I went downstairs because I use a mineral sachet. Minerals and water get really nicely absorbed together, right? Because that's just how they naturally occur. But most times we're drinking purified water without all those minerals. So we don't, it's just good to have the combination because water will move with wherever those minerals are going. So we start with water. When I talked about the root, I talked about protein, but now I'm going to talk about fat. My whole PhD dissertation was on fat. And I do think that fat has been maligned. I think that people don't understand all of the different kinds of fats and how important fats are. If we don't have certain fats, we can start to get issues with our skin, where our skin gets rough. Most of our brain is fat, and so then we start to get distortions with mood and cognition. And I don't know about you, but I do take omega-3 fatty acids, and there's a test where you can see how much you have. Orange foods are loaded with carotenoids. Carotenoids are a class of plant compound. There are 700 in nature, but in our bodies, we have about 40 to 50 of them. So what I'm thinking here is round orange foods. And I call this the flow system. We started with the root system, which was red. Now we got the flow system. And this is, again, low belly. So we're talking about all the water systems in the body. We're talking about the urinary tract. We are talking about prostate in men. We're talking about ovaries in women and the uterus, which share a space with the gut, but we're talking about the low gut. We're not talking about the high gut, like with the stomach and the pancreas. We're not there yet. We're talking about movement, and this is, just think of it, constipation. That's a problem, right? That's a lack of movement. There's an issue with water and moving things out. I also put in a lot of hormonal issues here too. For women, estrogen, progesterone. For men, I think about testosterone. And there's a whole other aspect to this that I'm not covering tonight, but I do this in life stages. So 0 to 10 years old is the root system. 11 to 20 represents how we developed in our flow system. So when I'm working with people and kind of mapping out their personal timeline, if they have an issue with their flow system, I often ask them, what happened when you were a teenager? What were things coming up for you in terms of hormones or gut issues or sexuality, sensuality, just kind of like where things were out of alignment. Well, we don't need to go into this, but hormones. Hormones are made in the body by a variety of tissues. And we mostly think in women that it's about the ovaries, but it's not. Once your ovaries run out of eggs, where do you get hormones from? You actually get it from fat tissue, right? So fat tissue has purpose to it. So if somebody is overactive, maybe they have an imbalance in their hormone levels, they have too much body fat, They might have some inflammatory reproductive issues. They might have some exposure to more what we call endocrine disruptors. There might be emotional aspects because not only is the flow system about movement and flow, it's about emotion, energy in motion, right? That's what we know about from more of the energy side of things. We want to move those emotions through, but sometimes they get stuck. And that's where we can get all kinds of issues. Sometimes I see that in low back. So if we look at the spine, I know I'm focusing more on the front of the body, but the spine is all in sync with these different systems. So the coccyx, which is like the tailbone, is connected to the root. But now if we move on up, we're in the sacral area, right? Just like it's sacred, sacral chakra. So this is an area of fused bones. Just kind of interesting. So anyway, there can be lots of imbalance here for folks. So when I see this, and this was me, this was like when I started painting, this was my antidote, right? Like I got my creativity moving because things were so stressed. So orange became my friend. And I was even studying essential fatty acids, which is part of what I see as a food strategy. So oils, fats, and having healthy balance of oils. If you look in our modernized society, we have a little bit too many of inflammatory fats, like omega-6 fats. I know some of you have heard of seed oils. I don't think all seed oils are bad. It's about the context, and it's about the amount. It's about so much about the quality of the oil. So another thing is also how do you keep your colon in balance, right? How do you keep your urinary tract in balance? What about the ovaries and the uterus, the reproductive system? Well, coincidentally, very interestingly, orange colored plant foods, and that would be things like oranges, tangerines, persimmons, papaya, mango, even carrots. They would all have compounds that would help the systems that connect to the reproductive system. And that goes for men too. Although men do benefit from the red plant compound called lycopene. Very good for the prostate. So in terms of like what would be good for the flow, it's to be in flow. Let the emotions move. Allow for creative expression. When women go through menopause and they stop having physical creativity, how are they replacing their creative expression? Are they now going to start writing their memoir? Are they going to take up crafts? We always need to have creativity in our lives. Creativity is part of healing. That's why it's called the healing art, right? And I feel like where people get really stuck is where they stop being creative. I hear so many times from people, Deanna, I'm not creative. Like, yes, you are. Your cells are dividing right now. Your body is creative. Your DNA is like a canvas. And all of your choices are like the paint on that canvas and the shapes that you're making. So this is where I think some people don't have good balance with because they're kind of stuck. They don't allow themselves to play, be childlike, go with the flow. They get kind of stuck in the control of it and not in the flow of it. And when we have healthy root, the structure connected to flow, this to me forms a great foundation for physical health. So that's protein, healthy fat, red foods, orange foods, and lifestyle strategies. So I'll pause there after the flow. Does this resonate for anybody? Anybody feel like, oh, this is one for me? Norma?
Do you have this information in your books?
Yes, I do. I have the whole food program as well. Like if you actually wanted to do where you're eating according to the colors, that's in the book.
Emotionally, I love red when it has every red in it. And I love red and orange when they move into each other.
Yes.
It feels beautiful and thrilling.
Yeah, I love that
I
too.
think that's the way with all the colors moving into each other.
Yeah, they're all in relationship to each other, right? I mean, it's we that's really what we want is how do we bring them all together within us?
Yes.
So when we need a little bit more warmth, play, creativity, try wearing orange. I have my wardrobe in a rainbow. So I kind of like intentionally feel out like every day, like, what is this day about? Oh, I need to focus. I'm going to wear indigo today. I use the color as a way to keep me wherever I want to be energetically.
There's a feeling that goes with it.
There is a feeling. So wearing the red and the orange, like you're describing, would be a great way. Like if you can bring those colors together, and if you're resonating with that, there's something there for you. All right. So let me just look at the chat real quick because I see a couple of, oh, saffron. Paula, this makes sense, especially in light of the support needing socially. I like saffron. Saffron is such a beautiful color. It's kind of like an orange yellow. Darlene, how do you feel about eating the rind of oranges and tangerines and cantaloupe? I actually think that the more we can tolerate eating the peel or the skin, the more nutrients we're actually getting. The only downside there is when it's sprayed and it's not washed well, right? Like, so we just have to be conscious of that. But absolutely. And in fact, if you take an orange and you've got the rind where you've got the white pectin, that is such good fiber. If people ate that, some people get surprised when I take a kiwi and I just bite into it like an apple. I eat the skin and everything, right? The skin of foods, plant foods, can be so nutritious. Now, there are exceptions. You don't want to eat like banana peel or, things that are thick and would not be so good. But, things like the oranges, like Darlene is asking, I think that there is definitely some potential there. So Paula is saying having some issues with sciatica, perhaps. I think that's what probably need more play. Yeah. And what is play for all of us? It might be different when we are 55, 65, 75, 85. I mean, we have to evaluate all the time. What is creativity right now at this time of life? Because, it changes. I don't paint anymore. I don't need it. I needed painting for what it was giving me medicinally and from a soul perspective, but I don't need it anymore. So I feel like everybody kind of has their thing. All right, let's move on to the number one favorite color for people. There was a study out of Manchester, England that was published, and they asked people, they had a color wheel, all the different colors. And in this study, they asked the people to say what their favorite color was and then what is their mood. And they found that people who were not anxious and depressed, in other words, had what they would refer to as a normal, healthy mood, chose this color yellow that you're seeing on the screen. It was number 14 in the wheel. Yellow denotes optimism. It denotes happiness. There was a counterpart study in children by the same group in England. And basically, when children see yellow, this color, they think it's like their birthday. They're happy. It's a celebration. So, you even think of like the smiley face, like many times it's a yellow circle, right? So it's like, wow, what an interesting association that we have with that yellow. So yellow is the fire element. So we talked about the root, which is earth. We talked about flow, which is water. Now we're up in the seat of fire, which is the stomach. So for those of you who have had some yoga, or maybe not, the stomach is the seat of rotting and ripening. My husband is an acupuncturist. So in Chinese medicine, the stomach and the spleen, they work together, right? Rotting and ripening, rotting and ripening. They're releasing acid. The pancreas is releasing enzymes to break things down so that you get energy. So this is your true Carolyn Mace in one of her, I don't know if it was one of her books or one of her lectures, she said the chakra that you live the most from is this one. This is your solar plexus. This is what I refer to as the fire system. So I connected to the upper digestive tract. And this is the system that is most out of balance for people. Number one, like I collect anonymously all of the quiz results from thousands of people. 80% of people have an imbalance of their fire, which means that they have an imbalance of their stomach, blood sugar, digestion. They might have acid reflux, bloating. You know, there's something off with the gut, right? Why is that? So if we think about I would say the psychological aspects of the fire system, it's really about burning bright. It's about achievement. It's goals. You know, I think in the timeline of how I present these, this is like our 20s. So we might be going to college and trying to figure out how are we going to make our way in the world. Many times this is when people are finding their way in the working world and establishing, you know, who are they in the world now that they have developed and been a teenager, they're done with schooling. Who are they? This is your ego, right? And so sometimes we burn a little bit too bright. We get kind of burnt out. And you see this with people, especially where maybe a single mom with kids working 2 jobs. I mean, this is like burnout, classic burnout. You see this with medical doctors. You see this with athletes. You see it with so many people in the way of, yes, in the root system, we talk about stress. In the fire system, we see the actual physical manifestation of that stress, whether it's mental stress, emotional stress, physical stress. Overall, one of the first things that can happen is what? We might see gut inflammation. So again, any kind of heat in the gut, pancreatitis, we've got some kind of overgrowth in the gut. You know, lots of different things there. Diverticulitis, you know, all kinds of gut things. So what is the nutrition aspect here? It's about carbohydrate. Okay, and I'm not against carbohydrate, but have we overdone carbohydrate in certain formats, like too much sugar, too much starch? That puts a huge strain on our glycemic intake and our gut. Now we start to increase sugar in the body. We start to put a strain on insulin production by the pancreas. It's too much. We start to get metabolic syndrome. And ultimately, we start to change things like the heart, and it becomes cardiometabolic syndrome. So pasta, as you're seeing here, I'm not against pasta, but it's all about the context, making the best choice. If we, you know, I would say the biggest thing that people struggle with is sweetness. And I often will say to them, if you're craving things that are sweet, where are you missing sweetness in your life? Right? I mean, let's look at like the psychological aspect of every food. You're missing protein, where are you missing grounding? You're missing fat, where are you missing flow? If you're craving the carbohydrate, you're craving the sugar, where are you missing the sweetness of life? Are you working too much? Are you pushing yourself too hard? Are you too achievement oriented? You're not celebrating. This is all about reward as well, right? So you don't want to burn out. So this is honey. You know, I think about yellow foods in general. You know, it's kind of interesting because yellow is an interesting color. If you look at our society, yellow bread, yellow pasta, yellow pancakes, yellow waffles, a lot of starchy foods are yellow, and those are draining foods. They actually drain our energy. But then you also have some good healthy yellow foods, depending on your body, because everybody's a little bit different. But here I'm showing yellow lentils, right? You want complex, sustained carbohydrates to give you energy. Bananas, well, if they're a little bit less ripe, you're going to have a lower glycemic load. So I'm setting the stage here for the one system that so many people have an imbalance with, which translates into digestive imbalance. Everything from, you lose your power. This is your power center. And when we give over our power to a lot of these, I would say, depleting foods, we lose our energy. This is why, if you even think of like after lunch, if you have like a big lunch, maybe like a big sandwich, lots of carbohydrates, potato chips, not too long after that, what happens? Don't you start to lose energy? It's like you start to take your internal resources. Your gut only has so much to give. We're learning so much about the gut microbiome. It's fascinating. So this is a little chart that shows how when we eat something, so this is just showing a chart at the top here, breakfast at 7:30 in the morning. You want to sustain your energy for like 4 to 6 hours. That's how long it takes. If you have a balanced carbohydrate, protein, fat meal, it'll take about 4 to 6 hours before your blood sugar returns back to baseline. A lot of things can happen as a result of that one meal, however. We can be creating inflammation. And this is where when people have ultra processed foods, we get in the stomach, the whole digestive tract. This is all creating kind of like this metabolic chaos. And then we start to have inflammation. The inflammation is what makes us feel kind of sick and low in energy. And then when we feel low in energy, we think, oh, well, I need a coffee, I need a Coke, I need a soft drink, right? And we get into this cycle where we have to somehow break free, where we get our energy back. And I'm talking energy, ATP energy from the cell, as much as I'm talking about the energetics. So many foods are brown, yellow, and white, and these are draining our body systems. So again, if it's overactive, what are we going to see? We might see binging, we might see overeating, lots of sweet foods. We might have cravings for certain foods. We might see a lot of digestive issues like GERD or reflux. Maybe a person eats and responds to high stress. Maybe they have an overactive liver, a fatty liver, high liver enzymes. They're always busy, right? Metabolic syndrome. And if they're underactive, now maybe they're losing energy. They have low blood sugar. They have a sluggish liver that can't properly detoxify. I didn't even mention the liver until now. The liver's part of this. We have our liver on our right side, stomach more or less in the middle, pancreas on the left. It's like our whole seat of transformation. They all need to work together. And if one of them is off, the whole system is off, right? Then we start to feel like we have low capacity and we feel burnt out. We don't have the energy to do what we really want to do. So what do we do for this, right? We're going to have high fiber, low glycemic foods. If you're going to have something with sugar, just bring in some protein or fat, right? Always have the sugar containing foods last in the meal. There's a sequence to it. You want to have the protein. So that's why even when I had breakfast this morning, I had a buckwheat sourdough, half of it was like an English muffin, gluten-free, but then I had eggs and I had some fruit and some sauerkraut. Well, what did I eat first? The eggs, because it's protein. I'm going to have the English muffin last, even though it's pretty high in fiber. Still, I try to reserve those carbs for the end of the meal so that you front load the stomach with things that are going to buffer and protect your body from the high sugar response. If you're going to have sweeteners, I always like to choose food sweeteners, applesauce, banana. But again, bringing that together with something like almond butter, like banana with almond butter, much better than banana alone, right? Because then you buffer that blood sugar response. What about yellow foods? Here's where bringing in a little bit of acid, like lemon juice and apple cider vinegar in water, excuse me, especially like even before a meal, can help with digestion in some cases. We think about ginger, turmeric, pineapple. Pineapple is rich in an enzyme, bromelain, that helps to break down protein and just in general can be good. And some of the yellow colored plant foods, which are rich in prebiotic fibers, right? Some of the squashes. So carbohydrates aren't bad. It's just a matter of the context and the sequence in which we eat them. All right. Any questions about yellow? When it comes to lifestyle, it's about the balance of work and play. Some people are just, I'm like this as well, kind of workaholic tendencies, like just doing, doing, doing. The fire system needs to be, kind of like that bee that I showed, the honey. And also to find things in life to bring in sweetness. There's a fun activity I like to do, and maybe you can do this in your own time. You take a piece of paper, you draw a line down the middle, you time yourself for 3 minutes, and you write, because it's the third system, for 3 minutes, you write down all the things that give you energy. Just write them all down, like travel, being with friends, eating certain foods give me energy, right? Then you stop, have a sip of water, give yourself a break. For the next 3 minutes, now you write down, what are all the things that take my energy? It's not just carbohydrate. Maybe if you're driving long distance or you've got certain family stresses, these things take your energy. You want to look at your energy bank account, right? Metaphorically speaking. Sharon.
Sorry, I had that on mute. When you have turmeric, do you have, I've heard this, and I've been putting turmeric on my eggs, but it said that you must put black pepper with it to make it activates the turmeric better. Is that true or not? Or is that just there's so much stuff being put out today. I don't know what's true and what's not.
Yes, it's true. The
Okay.
thing with turmeric is you want to combine it with fat, a little bit of fat. So I'm
Okay.
imagining that when you're making it with eggs, you already have the fat built in with the eggs. And yes, a little bit of black pepper. Black pepper has a compound that changes how that turmeric is being metabolized by the body. It kind of
Okay.
slows it down, so it gives it like longer lasting activity. So yeah, a little bit of black pepper can be okay.
Yeah, I was putting it on egg whites. And so if I'm putting it on egg whites, then maybe I should use a little bit of fat to cook them in, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the turmeric compounds don't get absorbed. But the egg
That's
yolks
good to
are
know.
incredibly rich in a variety of different nutrients, including lutein, choline, really
Oh, yeah.
important for the brain.
I eat lots of egg yolks.
Great,
Yeah,
great.
I do. I do. I like it. Now, when you're talking about putting the almond butter, would peanut butter do just as well with the
Sure,
bananas? Yeah. Okay.
sure. Yeah, some people are allergic to peanut butter, but if it's
Right.
like a whole, kind of like the crunchy peanut butter, you gotta like really mix up and it's not the high sweetener version
Right.
of peanut
I
butter.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because some of those nut butters, they put in sugar to make it
I know it.
smoother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I find it hard. I read all this stuff and all these things like you're talking about, but then I go to Weight Watchers, and then if I do some of those things, like let's just say that if I put a tablespoon of peanut butter with something, well, that's really high. That's a bunch of points right there. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
seems like it's hard to balance all of this stuff out to eat for your health and then to eat for the points and the lower calories and all of that. It gets to be a real juggling act.
that's true. And it's hard to sustain something like that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in functional medicine, we have a little bit of a different model on food in terms of less about the calories and more about the quality, the composition of the food,
Mm-hmm.
how that changes blood sugar response and, gut health
Yeah.
and a lot of that.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out about because I have been going to, I've graduated from it now, but I had to go to a pelvic floor therapist for some stuff, and she put me on a diet where I don't have any whey, I don't have any wheat, I don't have, a lot of stuff. I mean, like I eat sweet potatoes rather than white potatoes and a bunch of
Yeah,
stuff like that. And
yeah, I
no,
like that.
and nothing with any, like you said, no processed meats. But then I got to looking at like, okay, so like I'm using a pudding mix and it's got preservatives and stuff in it. And I started looking at all the things that I have that have preservatives in it and stuff like that. And it's really not easy to stay on that diet.
Yes, the more that we can stay closer to the form of nature's foods, the better
Right.
off we are. You know, that's like the perimeter of the
Mhm.
shopping, the food market, wherever we are, right? The produce section, meats,
Hmm.
fish, eggs, right? But
Yeah.
when we get in the middle and we start buying a lot of canned stuff, processed stuff, it just naturally that's where we have to start reading the labels, and then it becomes tricky.
Yeah, and I spend a lot of time cooking. I mean, just cooking food so that I have basic food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, I
It's not easy. I mean, it's not easy to kind of juggle all these different thoughts, well, okay, this is too high in calories, but I need this fat here. And so, I've got it down to kind of like I do avocado every day, the little mini cups of avocado, because that way I'm getting some fiber and I'm getting this. And I do chia seeds and I do my sweet potatoes. And so my diet, it just gets really boring.
yes, yes, yeah. Well, that's where we need diversity for sure.
Oh, don't
Well,
worry.
I'm
Last night I
glad
had
to have a separate conversation with you if you want to,
okay.
but it sounds like you're working with somebody, but yeah, diversity is important for the gut microbiome. We have to,
Yes, it
so many
is.
people are in food ruts where they just are eating the same thing, and that's not
Yeah,
so good. We need to
right.
bring in variety, and there's really good research on food variety. We actually have better nutritional status when we're eating a more diverse diet.
Hmm. So, like, say, like for instance, if you're fixing a smoothie in the morning, would you put like instead of just using say like strawberries, would it be better to put like a little tiny bit of pineapple, then a little bit of banana, and a little bit of strawberries? Mix up your fruits like that.
Yes. Either you can rotate them, and what I advocate is an every 3 day rotation.
Oh,
The
okay.
science says that you should have 30, at least 30 diverse foods in a week.
Oh, okay.
So that means, if you have a banana on Monday and you have one on Tuesday, you can't count that as part of the 30. Banana one time, that's it. So then the next day you have to be thinking about, well, what else can I bring in, right? Um, And what you could do too is, the way that I have the whole detox program set up is that you eat in these 3 day increments. And within the 3 days, you have the color that you're focusing on. And then
Oh,
the next
okay.
3 days, the color that you're focused. So the color helps to engage and prevents a lot of the boredom and also
Hmm.
gives you different phytonutrients in those foods.
Yeah, well, for the first time ever, I bought frozen pineapple. I've never bought that before, and I started buying that to throw into the smoothie, just like you said, to get the diversity.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's nice and
Yeah.
sweet. Just make sure you've got protein and a little bit of fat in your smoothie.
Oh, I do. I have the protein powders and that's been another difficult thing is not having a protein powder with whey or plant. I did find some egg protein powders that have worked real well.
That's great. Yeah. Exactly. You got to find certain ones and do that research. It's a lot to eat
It's a lot.
in this day and age.
Yes, it is.
Dottie, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering if you could just repeat the order you're supposed to eat your food in again.
Yeah.
Just remember to have the carbohydrates last.
Oh,
That's the
that's
most
all you have
important
to
piece.
remember.
So you can have like, how I had like the eggs first, the protein, the fat first, and then have the carbohydrates last.
Okay.
All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to go a little faster on the cooling colors. I think Dottie was saying that you like the cooling colors. My favorite,
Tonight.
I definitely love green. Green is, if we think of
Mhm.
a forest, the lush forest and just the cooling feeling that it brings us on a hot summer day. Green is the color of nature. Green is the color of healing. If we think of businesses and how businesses choose colors, many times a health related business uses green. Again, that connection to nature, things that are growing, things that are in balance. I connected to the heart chakra. So now we're in the middle of the body. We're up above the gut. Now, one thing I haven't been mentioning is, how I was saying if you've got an issue with your fire system, with your gut, many times it can affect the heart. So many times on either side of the chakra, you start to see an influence of if something's out of balance. So sometimes the heart can be out of balance because we actually have gut issues. Got all this inflammation we're bringing in, and now we're inflaming the heart, and we're changing up circulation, we're changing up heart rate, we're changing triglycerides and lipids, and this is all adding to the heart. So when I think of the heart, I'm also thinking of the lungs. So, in Chinese medicine, there's talk of like the heart and the lungs are like they're married. They work together, right? Because oxygenation, getting rid of carbon dioxide, I mean, they are essential. So we can never just talk about the heart without talking about the lungs and breath. So the element that we are now up into the upper part, as you can guess, is air,
Mm.
right? We're in air. So that's why breathing, deep breath, and one of the ways to calm our lower chakras would be through a nice deep belly breath, right? Using the and leveraging the upper in order to ground and center into the lower. So breath work is important. Being in nature is important for the parasympathetic nervous system. And if we think of, I would say that I've looked at so many food logs, I have worked with so many people. For the most part, people have green down, because quite honestly, there are just a lot of green foods. You have lettuces, you have avocado, you have beans, and, just the amount of green that we have is vast. Avocados, Sharon, you mentioned avocado. Avocado is such a neat food.
It is.
You see this greenish color close to the rim here. Look at how beautiful this is. An avocado actually has a phytochemical called lutein.
Mhm.
So, getting that greenish compound, making sure that you're really scraping the skin and getting that deep green in order to get those important phytochemicals. Believe it or not, a whole avocado actually gives you fiber. So you're not even eating the skin, but you get fiber from an avocado. You get magnesium, you get potassium, you get I think I did the calculation once. I think if you eat a whole avocado, medium size, it's more potassium than a banana. Usually banana has a connotation of potassium-rich food, but avocados are pretty fantastic and they're creamy, they're filling,
Mhm.
they, healthy fats, monounsaturated fats. We think of the Mediterranean diet. And if you think of a lot of the green leafy vegetables, right? I think probably depending on the time of year, whether you cook these or you just have them raw. But I think for some people, just a little bit of steaming of the greens can be good to inactivate certain things and to give other things. But green is about chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a great antioxidant. It is, sometimes even in my water, I like to add a little bit of chlorophyll. Um, I have just done a lot thinking about detoxification and clearing and binding. If you have a hamburger and you just eat the hamburger, there was a study at UCLA that showed that the hamburger can increase inflammation, but if you put half of an avocado on that hamburger and eat it, then you can flatline the inflammation. That work was done by Dr. Dave Heber's lab. So
Really?
avocado, bring in the greens. If you're going to be grilling this summer, make sure you have a fresh spinach salad or something green. If you have grilled foods, broiled, baked, anything where you get brown color, like you damage the food, you want green. Green is protective, it's healing. It is, again, rich in chlorophyll. It can bind things so that you're not taking them up in the body. So I call the fourth system, the heart chakra, I call it the love system. It's a system of compassion, expansion, and service. It's the cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory system. So when we expand, like when we take a nice deep breath, we're expanding the chest. When we are expanding our blood vessels and allowing blood to flow through, that's when we feel relaxed, right? We want to expand. You'll see in the chart that I also talk about the heart chakra is connected to the arms and the hands. So when we go to give somebody a hug or a handshake, it's an extension of the heart chakra. So overactive, high blood pressure, anything high. So high heart rate, high lipids, a lot of heat in the body, especially like hot, warm hands, easily flushed, easily overexerted, rapid breathing, shallow breathing. And I connect this with, we see this a lot with compassion fatigue, like people in the healthcare industry where they give so much of their heart. They're very compassionate, but yet they're not taking care of themselves, right? So it's like we can also have a lower or imbalance, like where you don't have a balance in the heart, and it's about self-care. So I see this with mothers, healthcare workers, any number of people here. So what do we want to eat? We want to eat things that are green, and we want high nitrate vegetables in order to get the conversion to what's called nitric oxide in the body. So arugula, beet greens, celery, any kind of green leafy vegetables which are rich in folate, magnesium, and vitamin K. I put garlic on this list too. Garlic kind of falls in other categories. Now, some people are on certain kind of drugs for clotting, right? So they have to watch their green leafy vegetables. So you have to get your prothrombin time pretty consistent in order, and then, bring in vegetables from that perspective. As far as lifestyle, of course, self-care, keeping emotions in check, being in nature, just movement and expansion in that way. All right, I'm going to zip into the aqua after this quickly since we only have 20 minutes. If you haven't, I'm sure you've all looked at HeartMath, organization with a heart rate variability metric. I think heart rate variability is an incredible metric to track for health. It helps us to know how we're responding to stress. I wear an Oura ring, so in real time, I can get my heart rate variability and kind of see like how my body's responding, especially when I'm sleeping. And so this is just showing not heart rate variability, but just heart rate, and how the heart doesn't lie. So whenever we feel a certain way, it's going to come through in the pattern of our heart rate. So if you look up at the top, this is somebody who is mentally focused. You kind of see these very small, jagged heart rate lines, kind of looking like that focus. Anger kind of, again, takes us out of that present state, centeredness. We become more incoherent. Relaxation, kind of this nice sinusoidal wave. And appreciation, the more we can find ourselves in gratitude, appreciation, the better it is for the heart, right? This is good stuff. So forest therapy, so much good science here. We see that people who spend time in a forest and do what's called forest bathing have better heart parameters. Blood pressure improves, heart rate decreases, oxygen saturation increases, so even the lungs improve, better mood, and also improvements in stress hormones that lead to changes in the immune system. So even if you get to a city park, somewhere green, even if you don't have, let's just say Sharon is in Arizona, probably don't have a lot of green areas, but you have a plant behind you. Plants, right? Just keep green in the environment. I was on a flight to Taiwan once, and inside the aircraft, there was a poster of a forest, just like you're seeing here. And I thought that they knew what they were doing. All of these reactive, angry people on the flight from any kind of delay. And then they have this forest that you're looking at the whole flight. So even looking at it, even if you're not actually in it, is better than not. All right, aquamarine. We're up in the throat. This is blue of the brain meets green of the heart. We are in the element of ether. We're looking at more of the sky, the blue sky. This is also about speaking our truth, because now we have the throat, we have the mouth, and the way that I contextualize it is it's everything here at the low face. It includes the ears. It includes the lips, the mouth. If you have teeth issues, it could also be this system, right? So when Jeanette was talking about periodontitis, any kind of gum issues, connective tissue, there can be combinations of systems at work here. But locationally, if you have something going on here, we want to be looking at the truth system. right? So when I think about, well, there are really not a lot of aquamarine foods. So I connect this to the how of eating, taking time, being mindful, hence the chopsticks. If we ate with chopsticks and we're not used to it, it's going to slow us down, right? Having soups, sauces, broths, anything where we have to, and there have been studies on this that when we if we have a chicken casserole and just eat that in 5 bites versus having all of those same ingredients in a soup, we're going to feel more full. We're going to trick the body in a way because we're going to eat the soup. It's warm and we're going to sit there with it. It has a totally different dynamic from a satiety perspective than the chicken casserole, right? So this is, what endocrine system is here? The thyroid. The thyroid actually looks like a butterfly and it sits at the base of the neck. It is, the way I think about it, thyroid metabolism, thyroid hormones, just overall, if we think of the symbolism, it's about speaking because of its location, and it would be connected to expression. It's also connected to taste. You know what's really interesting? Not many people realize this, but our emotions can change how we taste food. This was a study, it's an oldie, but a goodie. And they had 550 hockey game attendees, 4 wins, 3 losses, 1 tie. And they found that when there were positive emotions because there was a win, and then they had people try food after the games, they found that positive emotions were associated with more sweet and less sour. In other words, they probably didn't need to eat as much because things tasted really good. But when we have an emotional state that isn't as pleasant, where maybe like the team lost, now we have more sour and less sweet. So what I want you to think about here is emotional eating. It's been estimated that over 75% of overeating is due to emotional reasons. And in many ways, our emotions will change how we taste. I'm mentioning taste because we're talking about the tongue in this area, right? Our primary method of taste. So lots of different imbalances here. If you have recurring jaw issues, tight jaw, you're prone to sore throats, you've got neck pain, overactive thyroid, overeating, you might want to be looking at your truth system. Or conversely, if you have a loss of taste, loss of teeth, you have some kind of blockage or you feel stuck in the throat, numbness, you don't feel like eating. This is where I put a lot of different eating disorders as well, of which I did have one, as I mentioned, as a teenager. So my truth system, how do we get this throat? So much activity here. How do we bring it into alignment? So foods, what do we do here? I would say mindfulness, making sure we've got things like, as I mentioned, the soups. I had shown the sea plants because different sea plants like nori, dulse, wakame, Americans for the most part don't get a lot of sea plants, but in the Japanese diet, they do. And those different sea plants are great for creating broths with high mineral content. So like iodine, which we need for the thyroid gland. Having 1 Brazil nut or even 2 Brazil nuts total can give us enough selenium, which we need for healthy thyroid function as well. So working on that throat area, eating mindfully with awareness, humming, singing. When I was growing up, we would say grace. I even created a card deck where, you pick a card, you say the affirmation with the meal. And this is also where I put variety, ethnic foods, different tastes, experiences with food. All right, we're almost at the finish line. We've got blue, purple. I keep them separate, but really, this is indigo. Oh my goodness, this is the color that I would say most people don't get enough blue, purple. There was a survey that was done some years ago. Green was okay, red was okay. 88% of people did not get enough blue purple in their diet. So what do we think of when we think of blue purple foods? we think of the brain. This is the age of the brain. We're learning so much about the brain, the nervous system. We're learning about how the brain detoxifies at night when we sleep. What you're seeing on the screen here are neurons connecting. We talk about neuronal plasticity. You know, as you're listening to me speak and you're processing this, you know, your neurons are communicating and, you know, you're generating neurotransmitters. You've got this whole universe happening inside your brain matter, right? And so, what feeds the brain from a color perspective? The research, in fact, I could have spent this whole time just taking you through the research of blue purple foods in the brain. We really need this color. This color only shows up at certain times of the year. Depending on where we live, we may not have as much access, but we can always have frozen blueberries. We don't destroy the phytochemicals in blueberries that have been frozen. So keep that in mind. If you can't get fresh, what you want is the smaller blueberries, the more wild blueberries, like at Trader Joe's. They have the wild frozen, you'll find them there. The smaller the blueberry, the better. Blackberries would also be great for those of us who live in the Pacific Northwest, where we can find these on the roadside. Like, you know, that deep hue, right? It's so blue that it's black. You know, that shows that concentration of a lot of these compounds. They're called proanthocyanidins. And research has shown that that colorful compound seems to find its way into the brain and has an effect on certain things like learning and memory. Even in people who have good memory and good cognition, it can actually improve it further. So the sixth chakra is often referred to as the third eye. The third eye refers to the pituitary gland, which sits in the middle of the head. It's often called the master gland. And when I think of this system, I call it the insight. It encompasses the eyes and the eyebrows, the forehead, the brain, and it is truly connected to more than intelligence. It's about intuition. It's about visualizing. It's about dreaming. It's about sleep. It's about reflection, what comes through in your sleep state. So when we eat well, we sleep well. If we aren't eating well or we're eating too close to bedtime, this will impair our sleep, as we all know. So we can find a lack of balance here, right? So we might have an overactive mind. We might have insomnia. We're hyperactive. We might get pain from migraines. We might feel mentally anxious. We might be too over analytical, or we might have underactive insight where we need more mental stimulation. We're forgetting things. We are easily confused, right? So what I would say here in terms of foods, I've already mentioned them. There's a lot more here, but we're keeping it basic with making sure we have enough flavonoids from those blue purple foods. When it comes to the brain, you always have to think of the heart, because the heart fuels the brain, and it takes more energy for the heart to move blood against gravity up to the brain, right? So we need proper hydration, we need proper blood sugar, we need healthy fat, we need everything that we've already been talking about, but let's just add in there the blue purple foods, berries, all kinds of berries. This is really, and if you can't get berries, even if you have a little bit of Concord grape juice at the end of a meal, you get the grapes. If you're choosing grapes, choose purple. Anytime you get to choose purple foods. Purple is precious. So that means if you go to the store and you see purple cauliflower versus white cauliflower, which one are you going to get? Purple. You're going to see purple asparagus versus the green, you're going to get purple. Purple gives you additional nutrition that you wouldn't otherwise get, and it's very difficult to get it. It only occurs typically in the autumn months, depending on where you live, and if you are buying frozen food and all of that. So thinking of the brain, it's important to sleep well, right? Have proper meditation, give the mind the rest but you've got to nourish the brain like you would any other organ of the body, right? Good healthy fats, good healthy proteins for neurotransmitters, and that blue purple food. Then we're going to end tonight on white. So, and you're probably thinking, well, she didn't talk about tan or brown. I put tan and brown in yellow. So in the Rainbow Diet book, in the yellow chapter, I move from yellow into tan foods, and then I talk about brown foods, and I talk about fiber. But I do end on white, and white is about no food, truly. When I first wrote the Rainbow Diet, it was all about fasting. It's about the absence of food. It's about light. And in every spiritual tradition, for the most part, there is a withdrawal, an intentional withdrawal of food in order to bring us more into our non-physical self. But there are certain white foods that can be beneficial. But what has happened with white, right? It's kind of like the yellow foods where we see a lot of yellow starchy foods that just try to give us a quick fix of sweetness, but fall very flat. So when I was growing up, as I was telling you my story, I lived in the age of Wonder Bread where kids at school had white bread and I wanted white bread. And my mom would always make homemade bread, grainy, dark bread. And I would become very upset. And I'm like, I want white bread. I want to eat like the other kids. And she would say, Deanna, the whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead. But of course, I was like 8 years old and that didn't mean anything to me, but that always stuck. We think of white sugar, white flour, white salt. White can mean devoid of substance, right? And so when we think of foods, not always, right? I mean, sometimes we think of cauliflower, garlic, coconut. There are healthy white foods as well, but for the most part, there are a lot of processed white. When I think of fasting, I think of lightness. I do think that there's a lot of research on fasting, and it doesn't have to be for days on end, but like 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, just not eating a lot. It's our bodies aren't metabolically active at night. We're preparing for bedtime. We're not preparing to digest. We want to feel lighter. We don't want to feel heavy when we are going to bed. So as I mentioned, some of the white foods, coconut, garlic. When I think about clearing, right, I'm thinking of the pineal gland in the brain, which is our connection to light and darkness. It's about circadian rhythm. I teach a lot on environmental health and how things in our food supply are becoming really toxic, right? So if we just look, I mean, there are toxic foods, toxic water, we're becoming all much more aware. But one of the aspects I want to just prime you into is this whole thing about circadian rhythm. Um, Light and darkness and really honoring those cycles. We are now learning that it's not just what you eat, but it's when you eat it. So you could have a really healthy meal, but eat it at the wrong time. And now you've got metabolic issues because of that. So timing is everything. Eat when it's light. Eat much less when it's dark. So there's the old quote, which is, eat breakfast like a prince, lunch like a king, dinner like a pauper. Kind of like that. When it's really bright outside, it's noontime, metabolic system is firing, you're at the midpoint of the day, then you want less after that. So, when I think of the rhythm system, and this is about clearing, it's about fasting, it's about cycles, it's about connection to something greater than ourselves, right? Which is so much of what this group is about. But I do bring in the planet. Planetary health transmits into our health. We're like a little microcosm of this big macrocosm, right? So if the planet becomes toxic, we take those things in through air, water, and food. So just to be more aware. The element here is light. So just being connected to light. So foods organically grown, just making sure that we're making really good choices. We're detoxifying and cleansing the body properly. We're eating seasonally according to the rhythm of nature. And if we need to try an elimination diet to work out things that we might be sensitive to, that's just high level. So, and then lifestyle is to honor nature's rhythms. We even have moon rhythms, we have seasonal rhythms. And also, it's about the spirituality of eating. Eating can be a spiritual practice. Some people say, Deanna, I don't have time for spirituality. I am so stressed. I've got so much to do. And I said, but wait a minute, are you eating every day? Yes. Well, then make that a ritual. Make it like your highest spiritual calling in that meal. Like, what are you dedicating that meal to? Are you bringing gratitude, right? Move yourself through these 7 systems in that one meal. Make it the most spiritual event of the day, right? Because it does have the potential to do that. All right, 2 minutes left. We went through the rainbow really quickly. I'd like to know what you all took away. Maybe you can quickly chat it in, like, what did you take away from this? But hopefully I'm giving you a sense of how to look at the body, your life in a very holistic sense that encompasses color. And through the portal of color, looking at nutrition and lifestyle and your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects.
Mm.
So there you go. And there's my website. If you go to this website, when you go to it, there's a resource tab. When you click on the resources, you go down and you'll be able to take the quiz. You'll be able to download the Rainbow Diet Toolkit. You can download, I have the whole detox. I don't have the food plan on there. That's in the book, but you'll get a lot of tools just on that website.
Cool.
Thank you. I did a lot of talking. Sorry, we didn't have a lot of, Darlene is also wondering about black. Black goes in blue, purple. So it actually goes blue, purple, black, just like yellow goes yellow, tan, brown. So black, just like blackberries, black olives, right? So black denotes certain phytochemicals that belong with the blue and purple. So Paula is saying that root chakra. Root chakra, yes. Oh, you know what? And I often tell people when you don't know which of these 7, always go to the root. The root is your foundation. It's your physical body. Many people are really good about the upper chakras, right? Because like they meditate, they are into the heart. It's less comfortable to be in the lower chakras, to like really be in those aspects of the root, the emotions, those raw emotions, and to move them through. And most of all, that gut, our seat of fire.
So I have a quick question. It's about the intermittent fasting. Now, you did mention fasting, but what do you feel about the intermittent fasting where you actually, eat within an 8-hour period?
I think for some people that can be very good. For other people, like if they have unstable blood sugar or, they're on certain medications or they have an eating disorder or for some reason medically they can't do it, then you need to be really careful. But I think for most people, it can be a good thing, an 8 to 10 hour feeding window, if you will. So if you start eating at, let's just say 8 a.m., then you stop eating by 6 p.m. And I
Yeah.
bet many of us already kind of do that, but that means, then we talk about wet and dry fasting. Like, do you have water? Do you have tea in the time that you're not eating? So I think hydration is very important, actually. I'm more of an advocate, but then, of course, if you're waking up in the middle of the night and that's disrupting your sleep, then you don't want to be doing that. But I think within the first hour of waking, making sure that you hydrate, that should be the number one thing. When you get up, within that first hour, hydration, 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 because the incidence for things like stroke and just like, you want to be like, you did so much clearing in the body at night. The brain got rid of its waste. The gut was moving its waste. You want to like now move that stuff out of the body. So hydrate first thing. I mean, this is kind of like about how much I drink within the first hour of waking.
Mm.
So this is, I guess it's 20 ounces. But, just something like that. Just think of and spread the water through the day. I'm talking about a little bit more in the morning because you haven't had anything the whole evening. So you just need a little bit more. And, go outside, get some, just make sure you're exposed to bright light in some way so that your body, everything gets activated. Like, obviously, don't be looking at the sun, but, sunlight, or even on a cloudy day, you're actually getting full spectrum light from the sun.
Is it possible to have a separate conversation with you on virtual conversations?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So if you go through my website, there will be a contact us page. And
Okay,
if you go through that, then you can ask a question there, or we can talk about that.
okay. Nice.
All right. I hope that this was helpful and that you took something away and uh, in some way enriches your life.
Oh, yeah.
Deanna, Victoria has a question that was my question too, so I'm going to bring it up. Can coffee count as some hydration?
Yes, coffee can count as hydration, depending on, as long as you're not loading it up with, milk, sugar, other things in there. There's a threshold though for some people. Past a certain point, it can create more of a diuretic effect. But I think in general, coffee can count as the studies would show that yes, you're adding to your fluid. Just like if you were to have a soup would add to your hydration, depending on, like, is it a broth or is it chili? Because, obviously a broth is going to be more hydrating. So yes, there is, or even if you had cantaloupe or honeydew melon, also adds to hydration, or cucumbers, so yes, coffee is, can be counted. I wouldn't, my preference is to have coffee with the meal rather than open up the day that first hour with coffee, because that's a bit of a bit too much in some cases. Everybody responds differently to caffeine, however. For some people, they actually do quite well and they don't have a response. For other people, it kind of upregulates their sympathetic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you have
Well,
anything we can change in our diet to not wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning?
There can be several reasons for why people wake up at 2 to 3 in the morning. One thing can be just stress, like our body holds stress, and then like our mind gets thinking at a certain point. At 2 to 3 in the morning, this is when two phases of sleep are changing. Your sleep
right.
architecture is changing. And so, if your blood sugar is not intact and stable, sometimes you can wake up. So blood sugar, you might need a little bit of protein before you go to bed, like maybe a scant handful of almonds or a couple of spoonful of like yogurt without sugar in it, just to kind of keep your blood sugar stable, because otherwise sometimes blood sugar instability will wake you up. Um, it depends why you're waking up. Are you waking up to use the restroom? Are you waking up because your mind is racing? Are you waking up because your muscles and you're in pain? It could be magnesium. You might need more magnesium. But I would say for most people, it's stress and it's blood sugar.
Yeah, probably blood sugar.
Sometimes it's hormones for women. Sometimes it's melatonin, but melatonin is very closely connected to stress hormones. So I would say stress and blood sugar are two of the biggest.
Okay.
Jeanette.
Yeah, sometimes I wake up all night long with leg cramps, and they're terrible. I mean, they're real heavy duty leg cramps. I know it's circulatory probably, but do you have any other ideas on that?
Do you take magnesium?
I'm taking two different types now, three actually. I just added a third one. I take citrate, which keeps my digestive system working great. I have to regulate it, but be careful with it. I just theanate and just added glycinate, I think
Glycinate,
is.
glycinate, yeah. Glycinate would be the one for the cramping.
Ah,
Magnesium threonate is great for the brain and it helps to relax the brain. And,
uh-huh.
it's the one that can cross the blood-brain barrier. The mag citrate, like you said, it's good for energy, it's good for the gut. You get some absorption there. But the glycinate itself can even help with calming and that you might want to work with a practitioner on do you have enough in terms of the dose? Are you taking it like right before bedtime?
Hmm.
Diabetics need more. We all need more magnesium, but for the most part, it can lead to, if you don't have enough magnesium, it can lead to blood sugar instability. So it can, there are many different dominoes that could be involved here, but I usually think of magnesium, but not solely magnesium. It could also be a calcium issue.
Mm.
If you think of like how muscle contracts, you have calcium and magnesium working together. So if you're low in magnesium and or calcium, or maybe even other minerals, um, you might want to experiment. I mean, I know I have, even my husband he's like you, he gets these
Mm.
cramps where they just wake him up and then like he's gripping his leg. I mean, it just hurts so
Yeah.
much. But if he's consistent with his magnesium and I'm telling him, I'm like, you didn't take your magnesium. Like if he's consistent, he might get a cramp, but it's much less in intensity compared to not taking it. Now, that doesn't mean that that would work for you, but I do think the basics of muscle contraction are calcium, magnesium.
Okay, I just got the magnesium glycinate, just started, so I'm glad to hear that. I'll
Yeah.
pay attention to that, yeah. And I also take trace minerals.
Oh, that's
Uh,
good.
yeah. So I take all kinds of supplements now in my life.
Do all of you, I don't know, Dottie, if you want to take me off of the recording for this part, maybe I just speak.
Okay, hang on a minute.